Hello everyone, it's day 75 and today I have my 17 Indian Express newspaper and as usual I have two important articles on the explained page. One is regarding the draft digital competition bill and another is about the sheep Putin and the world. So let us try to read both of these articles one by one. So the first article is about the draft digital competition bill that has recently been introduced, not introduced, but the talks are going on, and the big tech companies are opposing it. So let us see what is the key insights in that bill and why the big tech are opposing it. So the last date for public comments on the draft digital competition bill 2024 passed on Wednesday. Taking a leaf out of the European regulatory handbook, the bill contains provisions which could stop tech giants from self preferencing their own services and using data gathered from the company to benefit another group company. It also sets presumptive norms to curb anti competitive practices before they actually take place, with heavy penalties to the tune of billions of dollars for violation. So, what are the key provisions? Predictive regulation. Currently, India follows an ex post facto antitrust framework regulating the market abuse after it takes place under the Competition Act 2002. One of the biggest criticism of this has been that regulating after the incident of the market abuse is simply too delayed. By the time the offending company has been penalized, market dynamics change to detriment of smaller competitors. The draft bill contains provisions to change this with an ex ante framework instead, which foresees potential harms that can arise out of antitrust issues and prescribes predetermined no go areas. So, due to the complex world of digital markets, which are ever growing and increasing interlinkages between various offerings made by a single company, a forward looking, preventive, and presumptive law is crucial to curb anti competition practices in the space. So, significant entities. The bill proposes that for a certain core digital services like search engines and social media sites, the Competition Commission of India should designate companies as systematically significant digital enterprises depending on various quantitative and qualitative parameters. These include if in the last three financial years its turnover in India is not less than 4,000 crore, or its global turnover is not less than $30 billion, or its gross merchandise value in India is not less than rupees 16,000 crore, or its global market capitalization is not less than $75 billion, or the core digital services provided by these companies should also have at least 1 crore end users and 10,000 business users. The CCI also has discretionary powers to designate entities not falling under these parameters as SSDEs if it believes that they have a significant presence in any given core digital service. So SSDEs will be prohibited from engaging in practices such as self-preferencing, anti-steering, and restricting third-party applications. If they violate these requirements, they can be fined up to 10% of their global turnover. So, associate digital enterprises. Understanding the role that data collected by one company of a major technology group can play in benefiting other group companies, the bill proposes to designate associate digital enterprises. So, associate digital enterprises would have the same obligations as SSDs, depending on the level of their involvement with the core digital of service offered by the main company. For instance, Google Maps or YouTube can be, in theory, designated as ADEs of Google Search depending on the level of data sharing between these entities and Google Search. So, criticism from the big tech. Naturally, there has been a significant resistance to the bill in its current form from big tech companies, industry bodies funded by tech companies, and boutique consultancies hoping to onboard tech clients. For big tech, an ex ante framework with the strict prescriptive norms could lead to a significant compliance burden and a shift focus from innovation and research to ensuring that companies do not presumptively engage in any anti competitive practice. So, as a result, the tech giants are calling for the current competition law to be strengthened rather than moving towards an ex ante framework. So, an industry executive told the Indian Express that because of the stringent requirements of the European Union's Digital Markets Act, which came into force fully earlier this year, which has been an increase in 4,000% in the time it takes to find things via Google search. India's new regulatory framework can lead to similar outcomes tech executives fear. Moreover, If the law were to go into effect as is, a company like Apple would have to allow iPhone users to download apps from a third party app store over Apple's own store. So, something that the company has lobbied against vehemently. While Android has a relatively open nature side loading of apps, Google too has advocated against this, primarily citing potential security ramifications of allowing third party downloads. Companies are also understood to be concerned about the broad definition, both quantitative and qualitative, of who an SSD could be. Unlike the EU's DMA, which specifically names the gatekeeper entities, in India's case, CCI's discretion will prevail. Something that companies believe could lead to arbitrary decision making that could also potentially impact startups. So, big tech companies are claiming that cutting down on data sharing could also impact smaller businesses who rely on their platforms to reach a big target audience. So, need for digital competition. The law comes on the back of the big tech's long history of anti-competitive offenses. Only last year, Google was fined rupees 1337 crore by the CCI for its anti-competitive conduct in the Android ecosystem. Moreover, in last decade or so, most tech-related innovations have has come from within the stables of a handful of American big tech giants like Google, Apple, Amazon, and Meta. So officials believe that this is due to the high market barriers for new entrants in the sector. In the online space, once a company corners a significant portion of the market, their product becomes a default way to access that particular service, with rivals finding it increasingly difficult to challenge their dominance. So, take for instance WhatsApp, which is owned by Meta, Facebook's parent company. In India, it has a market share of more than 97% among messaging app user. It is pretty much default messaging app everyone is expected to use. While there is always space for the niche online products, users who care about their privacy may choose Signal over WhatsApp and a search engine like DuckDuckGo and over Google search. They do not become the norm. While smaller companies did benefit from the cheap advertising that Google and Facebook provided them with compared to traditional media, this has also fueled a surveillance-based digital advertising industry, which is always making interferences about users behind the scenes and across platforms they access. Government officials believe all these cons will be better addressed via the ex ante framework proposed by the draft bill. So that was about the draft competition bill. Let us quickly read another important article, which is regarding which is for the international relation point of view, and this is regarding the Putin on his ninth visit to China since becoming Russia's leader. The West expects Xi to nudge Putin to end the war in Ukraine. India is watching the bonhomie between Moscow and the Beijing closely. So President Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping met at the historic Great Hall of People's seat of power of the Chinese Communist Party on Thursday, where a welcome ceremony for Russia's leader included a guard of honor by the China's People Liberation Army. Calling Xi my dear friend, Putin said it is of fundamental importance that relations between Russia and China are not opportunistic and are not directed against anyone. She said that China Russia friendship was everlasting and had become a model for a new type of international relations. The two leaders later attended a concern to celebrate 75 years of diplomatic ties. Putin's two-day visit to China becomes when Russia has taken a firm grip on the course of the war in Ukraine. She has just returned from a tour of Europe where he met with the president of France as well as the leaders of Hungary and Serbia, both of whom are friends with Putin. So let us see China, Russia, and the war. China and Russia signed a no limits strategic partnership only days before Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24, 2022. Uh, More than 2 years later, Russia controls large swathes of Ukrainian territory and is currently the midst of a successful push both in the northeastern Kharkiv region as well as in the south of the country. The Chinese role in the war has been a major concern for the West, led by the United States. This was forcefully flagged by the Secretary of State Antony J. Blinken and Treasury Secretary Janet Allen during a separate visit to China last month. Blinken said that China was the top supplier of dual use items which have both civilian and military applications. Russia, he said, would struggle to sustain its assault on the Ukraine without China's support. The US believes China is supplying tech that Russia is using to build missiles, tanks, and other battlefield weapons. Russian imports of machine tools, computer chips, and other dual use items from China have increased significantly. The sales of Chinese logistics equipments like lorries to transport troops and excavators to dig trenches to Russia have increased by 4 to 7 times since the war began. In his talks with both France President Emmanuel Macron and EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen, she pledged that China would not sell arms to Russia and would control the flow of dual-use goods to its military. Hosting Putin, hosting Putin a week later in Beijing, she reaffirmed the friendship between their two countries. He said he had met with Putin more than 40 times, as they had stayed in close touch, ensuring sound, steady, and smooth development of the relationship. This visit is Putin's 19th trip to China since 2000, and when he became the Russia's leader, and his first overseas visit since he began a new 6-year term that will keep him in power until at least 2030. The West expects Xi to use his leverage with Putin to end the war. While signing a statement deepening the strategic relationship with Russia, Xi said on Thursday that both sides agreed that a political settlement to the Ukraine crisis was the right direction. Putin, who would want to end the war when momentum is with him, and said he was grateful to China for trying to solve the crisis, and added that he would brief Xi on the situation in Ukraine, where Russian forces were advancing on several fronts. So, a Sino-Russian relationship. Last year, a White House spokesperson has said that China-Russia relationship with was a marriage of convenience, and the American National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan had referred to a cartoonish notion that these two countries have become unbreakable allies. There is a history to the development of Sino Russian ties, and the US has had a role to play in its evolution. The relationship between China and the Soviet Union did not begin well when when the chairman Mao Zedong visited Moscow after founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949. He was made to wait for weeks to meeting with Joseph Stalin. Mao is said to have been put in a remote dacha outside the capital, where, according to an article in the Smithsonian magazine, the sole recreational facility was broken table tennis table. During the Cold War, China and the USSR were rivals, competing for control of the global communist movement. Tensions between the countries rose dangerously in the early 1960s, and they fought a brief border war in 1969. The relationship began to improve with the death of Mao in 1976, but remained frosty right until the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. In the post-Cold War era, economic relations have formed a new strategic basis for Sino-Russian relations. China became Russia's biggest trading partner and the largest Asian investor in Russia. China views Russia as a powerhouse of raw materials and a valuable market for its consumer goods. The West's hostile approach towards Russia after the annexation of Crimea in 2014 brought Moscow closer to Beijing. So India has always felt it was the West that pushed Russia into the tighter embrace of China. So, to the critical concerns for India. For New Delhi, Russia China defense axis throws up critical questions. About 60 to 70% of Indian defense supplies came from Russia, and New Delhi's needs regular and reliable supplies, especially at the time when India and Chinese soldiers are locked in a standoff at the border for the last 4 years. Many Western analysts have cautioned India about the scenario in which Russia becomes a junior partner of China. At the same time, India would not want Russian defense industry to suffer as a result of Western sanctions, at least in the short to medium term. What would Russia do if war were to break out between India and China? The Soviet Union's position during 1962 war was not particularly supportive of India. Moscow did extend its support during the 1971 war. However, this is neither 1962 nor 1971, and Vladimir Putin's Russia is not the old Soviet Union. So that was all from today's newspaper. So we have completed the 75 days journey, but I would like to continue this journey up to at least 100 days. So let us meet tomorrow with some another important articles. So till then,